Major funding for these broadcasts has been provided by grants from the CUNY TV Foundation, Capital One Bank, Genova Burns, Gian Tomasi and Webster, New York Community Bank, the Witkoff Group, M&T Bank, Perfect Building Maintenance, Chase Commercial Term Lending, Greenberg Traurig, LLP, Kilroy Architectural Windows, New York's Window Company. Additional funding is provided by grants from AKA Hotels, Corman Communities, Aerial Property Advisors, Bank of America Merrill Lynch, Bank Leumi USA, Briarwood Organization, CBRE, Colliers International NYC, Cushman & Wakefield, Customers Bank, DDG, Dime Savings Bank of Williamsburg, Eastern Union Funding, Flushing Bank, Friedman LLP, Gemini Real Estate Advisors LLC, Herrick Feinstein LLP, Hersha Hospitality Trust, Investors Bank, James D. Kuhn Real Estate Institute at Syracuse University, James Orphanides Centurion Holdings, Margolin Weiner and Evans LLP, Madison Realty Capital, Massey Knackle Realty Services, Matone Group, Meridian Capital Group, Newmark Grubb Knight Frank, New Banks, People's United Bank, RBS Citizens Bank, SJP Properties, Sterling & Sterling, Stonehenge Partners, TD Bank, Terra CRG, The Continuum Company, LLC, and these friends.
So I hear, and everybody says that the real estate market in New York City is really doing very well. So I wanted to take a different perspective. I didn't want to say that a baby boomer is promoting his thoughts. So today I've brought people half the age of the baby boomer, not always all half the age of the baby boomer, to provide their insight on where they see the real estate market. And I am even going to tell their ages because it's going to be interesting. From originally from Chicago, Illinois, 30 years of age, Chad Tredway, who is the head of Northeast Sales for Chase Commercial Term Lending of JP Morgan Chase. From Columbus, Ohio, Melissa Roman Burch, who is the Executive Vice President for Commercial and Residential Development at Forest City Ratner. Ranging in at 35 years of age is Debra Tantleff, who is a Vice President of Development for Roseland, a Mack Cali company. And last but not least, at 35 years of age?
34.
34. Okay, I'm sorry. So we'll have a celebration for your 35th. We have Andrew Barrocas, who is the CEO of MNS. So now, everyone here, even you, wait, you saw the crisis, even though you were young. You went to Florida over there. You know, you were taking care of the WAMU headaches in Miami over there. I mean, let's look at 2008, when there was, as we would say, a little aggravation in the streets. It was a difficult market. How do you look at 2008 and 2014, Melissa?
Sure. We have seen that when you look at what's happened in Brooklyn, in 2008, let me just give a little bit of a frame of what was happening there, was that downtown Brooklyn was just at the precipice of really being established as a residential location. You had some early condominium projects that were testing the waters and doing okay.
And some went bankrupt too?
Yes, and some that ultimately went bankrupt too. We actually were amongst the first opening up a new wave of high-rise residential living with our 80 DeKalb project, which, you know, coupled with that, Equity Residential Project and an Avalon Bay project, were really the first high-rise luxury amenitized living in downtown Brooklyn. We all opened up in 2009, which in many ways was worse than 2008 because the shock had hit and we were staring into the abyss. And people predicted the rental apocalypse of downtown Brooklyn. And what happened was exactly the opposite. We leased up in record time, and all of the projects were successful. Because what happened in this period is that the job growth continued to grow within New York, people continued to move into the city, and housing permits plummeted.
That was in 2008, and the market has absorbed. You know, everyone wants to be in Brooklyn. I mean, Brooklyn has 2.4 million residents. It's a market, but are we? You know, maybe I'm the, you know, as people say, you know, I'm a pessimist basically at heart. But I see the market doing well, but I just worry about the world. I mean, I worry about the world, and this is a question that I can ask Andrew. The biggest problem is certain people could afford to be in the Forest City Ratner and the Equity Residential and the new Atlantic Yard apartments at a certain price. But many people who are working, who aren't earning that, where are they living?
So, I mean, they're, you know, getting pushed out further into certain areas of Brooklyn that are, you know, up and coming neighborhoods, you know, but the absorption levels that you're seeing in these buildings is, you know, what's very impressive. You know, just going back to what Melissa was saying, there was 2,000 units that came in 2009. I do a lot of reporting on the market, and I was nervous to see 2,000 units coming to the market, and they got absorbed, I think, in a year, which I thought was going to take 2 years.
They got absorbed in a year. They got absorbed at a rent of approximately $32 a foot, and those units today are probably leasing for $50 a foot.
Yeah,
So,
I think
you know, that's
2000,
what the world has really changed over there.
2009, you probably
2009,
saw
we
high
actually leased up
30s,
for-
low 40s, I
We
would say.
actually leased up for about $50 a foot.
But you did,
and
but
now
I know that Equity Residential was much lower, and Avalon
we
was
were a little
lower.
bit lower. We were definitely the best in class in the market, but what you've seen is that all of these projects have continued to see very strong rent growth. And when you look at where leases are being made today for new development, you're talking $60 a foot.
But let's look at it this way. I could go to the Garden State. I could be in a good transportation area. I could be in Jersey City. I could be in Weehawken. And how much is the rents over there? They're much less, right, Debra?
So in Jersey City, you know, the peak highest and best in the market is low 40s a square foot. And as you come north up the waterfront, Weehawken, West New York, you're still 38, 36.
So look at the difference, Andrew. Look at those price constraints and how fast. I mean, the transportation hub from Jersey City and those markets to the financial center, the World Trade Center, is a fantastic market.
It's incredible. I mean, we were, to your point, Roseland had opened a building in Jersey City, went under construction third quarter 2009. Was one of the only, multifamily projects under construction during the market crash, and, over 500 units, and was highest rents in the New Jersey market with the fastest lease up in New Jersey history. And what you're seeing now on new product that's getting delivered to the waterfront and even in urban infill markets is extreme levels of absorption with nominal levels of incentives on initial lease up.
How do you, as the banker, look at the market today? Because Chase, has this great product that you're involved with, which is a multifamily-oriented type of product, where once in a while you take some ground floor retail. Talk about how you look at the market today, the opportunities for Chase, the opportunities, and as we said, there's a lot of competition also.
Right, so I'd say, first of all, we're incredibly committed to the New York and the Northeast market. I tell you, as the panelists have said, the demand is there. So we believe in the supply and demand characteristics of the market. I think one of the stats we looked at was, 50,000 residents per year are slated to come to New York City, but housing permits make it such that it's hard to build. So you've got rents that tend to be a little bit higher. In terms of what we do in Chase Commercial Term Lending, we provide long-term financing, just like you said, in communities with workforce housing. We tend to focus on some sort of rent regulation when we make our loans as well, which gives our portfolio a little bit of cycle resistance. But as we look at the market, we remain committed in lending and to serving our customers.
How do you know, and this is a question maybe for Andrew and maybe a little bit on Melissa, right now, especially in Brooklyn and in Long Island City and certain parts of Manhattan, we're seeing New York City is under retailed. way under retailed. And I think a great example is look what Levine sold his property for in Williamsburg, the retail component.
million.
Okay, so if you take the retail components, it's like I did 2 weeks ago with Michael Pinchick, you take these retail stores where maybe, you know, you have the mom and pops or maybe the Crate and Barrel Juniors or something like that, the restaurants. How do you look at the retail opportunities today in the boroughs? Like you were talking before about Long Island City, and you were we'll talk about Harlem. How do you?
I mean, it's obviously a big driver for residential. You know, a lot of these areas that you're talking about, Long Island City, very under amenitized, still don't have those big box retailers. You know, even Williamsburg, which is a pretty established Brooklyn market now, still, you know, it's within the last year or two that we saw grocery stores coming there. We're getting a Whole Foods coming to Bedford Avenue now, is a big amenity for the area. But still, there's a lot of these areas that are under amenitized, which, you know, we do expect a lot more coming with the residential growth.
Are you doing, and I'll ask all three of you, you know, a number of years ago, and it's still very big, is Fresh Direct. And the Fresh Direct freezers or the boxes in the area, are you seeing that in new developments today, that they're building the Fresh Direct because people are working different hours?
I mean, we do incorporate that into developments, and it's definitely an amenity for a lot of people. You know, I think it's not as big as it might have once been, and especially when we were going into areas that, you know, like a Williamsburg, that
Where you didn't have the supermarket, you didn't have the trade show.
Yeah, we've seen a surge of internet-based ordering in terms of when you look at the package rooms.
The Peapod rooms.
I mean, it's Fresh Direct mostly that we find in our buildings, and people are really using Fresh Direct. It's so convenient, but you know, whether it's Amazon Prime or any of these other e-commerce sites, the package rooms, we've expanded dramatically in our new developments because that's how people are interacting with the world.
Are you doing that also in Jersey?
Absolutely. Over the course of our last range of developments, the package rooms have significantly increased in size.
Package rooms and bike rooms.
Bike rooms.
Everyone is riding a bike. I mean, the amount of bike storage, the bike valet, it is such a biking culture that's really taken
what about electric
hold.
cars? Are you seeing, I mean, you're talking about new developments, are you seeing the electric meters, the power things?
There's about 900 apartments that I'm overseeing under development and construction right now, and all of those properties are LEED Silver certifiable design. They all implement car charging stations. And to your comment about retail and to your questions about efficiencies of delivering, I think that the global trend that we're seeing in Jersey, and I would venture to say, although I'm curious to hear from the panel, is there's just this overall growing and an ever-increasing demand for an efficient lifestyle. So it's not necessarily how much retail is walkable downtown, it's what does the hospital and the community have to offer me? Is there a theater? Are there parks? I can order from Amazon. I can order Fresh Direct. It's more important to have the restaurants than to necessarily have the big box retailers, because some of those boutique services are available in a different model.
You bring up some very important and interesting matters. One of the biggest problems today in Brooklyn is the closure of hospitals, the potential closure of hospitals.
Correct.
And with the number of people growing there, and I had recently, my other show, I had the founding dean of the Hofstra North Shore LIJ Medical School. And North Shore would like to possibly do something, and so does NYU want to do something with the Litch site over there, because there is a need. I mean, look at the growing population in Brooklyn where it is. Now, in Long Island City, it's a little different because Long Island City, Mount Sinai is making an expansion, coupled with you have the Flushing hospitals, you have a variety of other hospitals over there. So you need the hospitals, and you also need the amenities of schools, okay? Yeah. You all have young children, okay? And that's a necessity.
No, that's exactly right. And in fact, one of the benefits of doing large-scale master plan development like we're doing at Atlantic Yards is that we're really thinking about creating a neighborhood. And you've hit on two very important amenities within that community. I mean, we like to talk a lot about the residential and the arena and all the retail, and those are critically important, but so is the infrastructure of a community. We will have a health center, we will have a K-8 school, and then 8 acres of public open space. So talk about the ultimate amenity is really having access to that type of outdoor recreation, right outside your front door.
Well, when Chase looks at a deal to underwrite, a lot of the properties that you've been underwriting are, seasoned, established properties as opposed to brand new properties.
Correct.
How do you look at the market with potential rents? Because as Andrew would tell you, rents have been going up on multifamily, and once they get out of the stabilization, the market rate's there. How do you look at those things?
No, that's right. So our borrowers tend to be a little bit more conservative in nature. They tend to be long-term cash flow investors. We've been keeping an eye on rents in the Northeast, specifically in New York City, just given the rate increases every year. So what that does is, as we look at properties, we just have to make sure we build an adequate amount of cushion to sustain some cash flow shocks.
Well, what's your thoughts of, our young lady over here? I have Brooklyn on this side. Forest City's not only Brooklyn, they're all over there in Harlem and all over the
We're a
city.
five-borough developer.
Okay, five-borough
Right,
developer.
right.
Staten Island.
Yes, we do. Retail centers on Staten Island.
Okay. How do you look at, and that relates very well, and I want Andrew's comment. So how do you look at New Jersey, okay? New Jersey and the other boroughs. Everybody wants to be in Manhattan, but, there's the Bronx happens to have some good trains. The capability over there. Long Island City, we know how great it is. Astoria, the opportunities. Even Morristown, when you had the trains into the city. How do you, as a banker, look at those situations on a lending perspective?
Well, I tell you, the first thing we do is just look for the sponsor. Right, so we tend to be sponsor-driven. We're looking for people with geographic expertise who want to grow with the bank over time. But what I would say is, as we look at properties that we lend on in terms of our geographic footprint, most of the properties that we see in Jersey tend to have a closer commute into the city. And that's really been where we've seen a number of our borrowers buying property.
Okay, so which is what the comment that I made earlier prior to the show in the green room is that the real key for anything, and the reason why Atlantic Yards and why Forest City Ratner has done well, like in the Harlem properties and other things, is the transit development. And as you were saying, Andrew, before, one of the big advantages of why there are so many new developments in Long Island City is the convenience of transportation. Do you see, and you live up in Westchester, do you see new developments, new residential developments being done there?
There is a lot of, I know somebody who's doing a couple developments in White Plains, and he's underwriting rents, very comparable to where the New Jersey waterfront is. But there's job opportunity. There's a lot of job creation in these areas like White Plains.
Which is interesting because so I'm the only one who knows this. Many years ago, before you were in this business, many of the companies from New York would relocate. Kraft, Exxon, all these companies relocated to Westchester. And what has happened is many of them have left. They're no longer in business, or they've relocated to the south. So a number of these properties, especially owned by Mac Calley specifically, they are taking these properties, these office complexes, and now redeveloping them into residential complexes, which I believe, I know that's being done. Correct, Debra?
Yeah, there's a big general trend in New Jersey to revisit and reassess the valuation of these, office campuses that are 80% occupied, 90% occupied, and how can we reposition them and create these communities that will generate a lot more money in taxes to the municipality and utilize the land basis on a better product.
So here's the question which relates. 20 years ago, when you were 16, when you were 10, when you were 15, and you were 14, there weren't companies, there wasn't something even the title of the internet. There weren't companies like eBay, Google, Amazon, all of this, and they weren't all these tech companies. How do you see the proliferation of these tech companies having an effect both on the residential and the retail market?
Tech is playing a huge role right now in Brooklyn. There's a tech triangle concept that's been formed with this interplay between Dumbo, which has a lot of the very, very early startups, with the Brooklyn Navy Yard, which is doing light industrial manufacturing, like 3D printers and the like, and then Metrotech, which is where...
And also making modular housing, correct?
And also making modular housing in the
Okay,
Brooklyn
please,
Navy
yeah.
Yard. You're very good. So there's a cluster that's really begun to form, and people want to live close to where they work, and there are a lot more places that people are showing up to work. It's not just about the central business districts anymore. And there was a trend that people thought was going to wipe out office space or dramatically reduce it because everyone was going to start a business in their homes.
They were also hoteling.
They were going to hotel, they were going to work out of their living rooms, and now we're finding with companies like WeWork and General Assembly and the Nua House that people want to work together and they want to work in these collaborative settings. And these are popping up all over the boroughs and all over Manhattan. And these are generating a lot of new technology companies, creating a lot of collaboration. And this is the way that we're going to grow the job base in the city, is through this level of entrepreneurship.
One of the things that I look for is just, jobs are being created and there's a need for housing. Like Melissa said, people want to be in close proximity to, where they work. And as long as jobs are being created in those areas, you'll see development continue to grow.
We hear feedback from the folks at the World Trade Center development that one of the big draws of moving downtown is the proximity of their workforce, which all lives in Brooklyn. And I mean, that's somewhat dramatized, obviously, but there is such a center of gravity with the young people moving.
Staten Island, it's another borough. I'll have to take you out there. But what happens was, my wife used to be in the employment business, and what happened was that most of the people who would work in Lower Manhattan, there was a large preponderance of Staten Island residents because of the convenience of the ferry and coming in there. So this is, it's a live work. I mean, I think the real key, and you've seen it especially in New Jersey, and we can really look at it, is if you have the transit-oriented development, people will come. And that's possibly a problem like in Greenpoint, because Greenpoint, even though it has great potential, it has good routes.
Well, we have bikes. We have bikes.
I know, but bikes...
Water taxi.
Okay, but you know what I'm saying. The bike and the water taxi and all the rest is not a substitute for the good subway, or the the light rail that you've done in New Jersey.
Yeah, but I have a little bit of a different take on that, because in Jersey,
I'm accepting it.
And a little bit. In Jersey, transportation is a key component in being able to have a vital infrastructure and community. But in New Jersey, there's a meaningful percentage of the population that views transportation as an amenity, and for a developer, it's a very expensive amenity. So you have very prolific towns like a Jersey City where they actually maximize their parking ratios and say you're maxing out at 0.7 spaces per unit. Whereas you go into more suburban towns who don't quite appreciate that people in New Jersey still want to have their cars. They may be having 1 car per household instead of 2, but they still haven't quite gotten the need to put that maximum threshold on parking requirements. And with the incentives that New Jersey as a state is looking at to attract businesses and keep businesses in New Jersey, the transportation component is key and critical, but it's a fundamental expansion of these innovative centers and lifestyles that you have a lot of pharmaceutical companies in New Jersey that are teaming up with hospitals and universities to expand their R&D facilities, and you have those doctors, those nurses, those R&D professionals, those are the people who are looking for housing in those suburban urban communities. And as much as they use transportation, they'll still most likely have 1 car per household.
What's interesting, perhaps in New York City, you'll have 1/8 of a car or 1/20th car for a household because, first of all, there are no more parking lots. So with the fact that the garages, what I see happening in New York City even better, I believe, is you're going to see the proliferation of zip cars and car sharing, because it happens to be a great opportunity. I know I did some work for a Venezuelan-based bank, and when their people come in, they just go and get the car, they go to the zip car, they have the 6 or 7 hours, and I think that's really, it's it's like the changing of technology and the changing of the world over there, before the internet, before the tech bubble. If you had a crystal ball and said, you know, in the same way that I went back 20 years, if you had to go in the future, where do you think there are the best opportunities for development in New York City and the tri-state area? Deborah?
I think there's a tremendous amount of opportunity in historic secondary markets in New Jersey, and I think South Jersey, particularly with the Rutgers-Rowan University merger and the Economic Opportunity Act and the focus on Camden.
What about Newark?
I'm a big believer in Newark. I think I'm going to withhold my opinion as the politics of the mayor election play out. Newark offers a lot. There's just you know, some thresholds to get over, but there are, you know, markets like Hackensack or
Patterson,
Passaic, communities that have been targeted by the Economic Opportunity Act, and municipalities that are affiliated with universities and hospitals are really going to be those opportunity and prime markets.
which is very interesting because if you look at the startup program that Governor Cuomo came in, offering businesses 10 years tax-free if you're on a campus of a state university, which is Stony Brook, Fredonia, you know, all of the state universities. That's an incentive way to create. Where do you see as an opportunity over the next 10 years?
I mean, I think year-round parks, year-round transportation in New York City and the borough specifically, it's golden.
Do you think ever Coney Island and East New York, or is that not yet?
Not yet. I think, you know, like when I was saying that, I'm thinking of an area like Kensington, Prospect, Lefferts Garden. You know, you have the Q train, which is great, 15-minute shot right into Manhattan, obviously being close proximity to the park. So, you know, that's something that I always look with my clients is close proximity to transportation and parks. And then certain communities. I think the gay communities are good to follow and from a residential development standpoint, and the arts communities. So I like an area like Bushwick. Right now, Park Slope has a big gay community and is doing extremely well. So those are things that I specifically look for.
How do you look at, I mean, but we just transplanted you here, so.
Yeah, so I've got a slightly different take. I think I'd echo the panel, and we look at infrastructure, right? And so we tend to, as lenders, come in once a community is in place and our properties are in place.
You don't want to be the first kid on the block.
Exactly right. Exactly right. So we're a fan of consistency, and we tend to be in areas where cash.
That's why you're such a small little bank. Right? You know, consistency, safety is nothing wrong. You know, keep it safe. It doesn't hurt doing the right thing.
Exactly.
And you,
I think it's worth talking a little bit about the infrastructure because we all have talked about the importance of transit. You've talked about it as a key investment strategy. It is essential to where we think about development. You have the extension of the 7 train that is bringing to life the entire, you know, far west side with the Hudson Yards and the unbelievable amount of development, both commercial and residential, happening there.
I wish we had more time, but 30 minutes are very difficult.
Uh-oh.
But I love the infrastructure, and I promise I will make that pledge that I will have all of you back before the end of the season. And I'd like to thank Chad, Alyssa, Deborah, and Andrew, and I'll see you next week.